All right, great. Thank you, Gina. Awesome. Okay, so I have two monitors today, which is a new setup for me. So if I'm looking back and forth, that's what's happening. Let's get started. So we're here today to talk about the SAT and the ACT, and what that even is. Who am I? Most of you know me, but I just left the slide in here in case we have some new people who haven't seen me around yet. So my name is Josephine. I'm the founder of Strive to Learn. I've been a college admissions consultant and also a test prep expert for over 15 years. And I'm really passionate about mentoring students, especially when it comes to things like standardized tests, because they can be really, really annoying. So we're going to unpack that today together. So a quick overview of what we're going to be doing. So we are going to talk about what the SAT and the ACT measure, how to predict success in college. What does test optional mean and test blind? Probably some terms you've heard thrown about, especially during the pandemic. We're going to compare the SAT and the ACT and what they are. We're also going to take a look at what is standardized testing like specifically for Waldorf students, unique challenges and opportunities that you guys face, how to decide which test to take, what your next test steps would be if you decide to take them, what timeline, test dates, and registration information you'd be looking at. Then we have a Q&A, and during that Q&A, we're going to be doing one-on-one advising in breakout rooms. So that is something that you can basically talk about, if you've taken the test before, because we did administer them at Waldorf in the fall, you can go over your results and kind of find out how they compare and all that fun stuff. So that'll be one-on-one with Rachel and William, who are here as well. But let's get into the nitty-gritty first. Let's talk about all this. Also, feel free to write questions in the chat. Let me just open my chat box in here. Okay, perfect. So I just want to make sure I can see anything you guys write. So I'm going to keep my chat box open. So feel free to write things in there if you have questions along the way. There is a Q&A at the end, but if you have a quick follow-up questions on one of the slides, you can ask in the moment as well. Okay, so why are we here today? We're here today to talk about the SAT, ACT, and what they measure. So let me tell you what the test makers say they measure. Does anyone have an idea here? Type it in the chat. Does anyone have an idea of what should go in this speech bubble, what they measure? I'm gonna need at least 3 suggestions of what you think these test measures. Just throw something at me. Skills. All right, what kind of skills? Like art skills or horseback riding skills. Okay, knowledge, test taking ability. Okay, so we have 3 things in here. I'm going to count 3 even though, okay, perfect. There's another one. How to apply knowledge, exactly. So you would think it's knowledge that you gained in high school, right? What they say it measures is college readiness. So we have knowledge, right? Skills, test taking ability. Those were some of the guesses. And I think all of those are a little bit on there, and also kind of none of those are on there a little bit. So it goes a couple different ways. So let's really dig into what does it mean to be ready for college. So I have a little case study for you guys. We're going to take a look at a student. Her name is Margot. She had a composite score of 1200, which put her in the 74th percentile of the nation. So not bad. And her percentile for math, however, was a little bit lower. It was the 50th percentile. Also not bad. That's at average, but she felt like, oh man, I'm only at the 50th percentile in the nation with my math score. So she was not feeling that great about it, but let's take a look at what she ended up doing. So Margot ended up going to college. She got a dual bachelor's degree in psychology and ethnographic documentary, and ended up graduating summa cum laude. That means a 4.0 GPA cumulative, so all A's. And then she went on to graduate school. So far, we probably think, okay, Margot, like even though her math was very average and her test score was pretty good, but not great. She ended up, she seemed pretty ready for college, right? Even though, 50 at average might not seem that ready. And then after that, in her adult years, she went on to teach at Chapman University, and also founded her own company. So my question is, would you consider Margot to have been successful in her education and future career? Give me a yes in the chat if you think that she was successful, or a no if you're like, meh, she really like didn't do well in college and things like that. Okay, so she did pretty well. Why are we talking about her? Well, I also think that she did really well because she was obviously me, as Linda immediately found out. And the idea, right, is measuring college readiness, right, was the whole question. And I definitely felt like my SAT score did not show how ready I actually felt for college. I did not feel like I was just average. I felt like I had studied hard. I'd learned a lot in high school, and I was really excited to go to college. And so calling it a college readiness benchmark, for me, was definitely kind of a downer, because I started doubting myself a little bit based on my SAT score. So I just want to show you guys this, because SAT and ACT scores are not the future defining monsters that you might think they are. They're really only one part of your college application, and they're not going to define your entire future. So let's take a look at what are the moving parts of a college application. We've talked about this before, but I just want to remind you that there are a lot of different things, a lot of aspects that get factored in as much or often even more than your SAT or ACT scores. So all of these are moving parts of a college application. Let's take a look at your GPA versus your SAT. GPA was one of those factors that the colleges really look at. Right? You have a GPA. So which do you think weighs heavier on your college application, your GPA or your SAT score? Which one do you think is more important to them? Which one do they look at more, GPA or SAT score? What has more weight when you apply to college? Okay, we got one vote for GPA. Chat is blowing up. Okay, everyone thinks it's GPA, and you're absolutely right. It is the GPA. The GPA is much more important. So I just want you to know that, I'm not just making all this up. There have been a lot of studies about what predicts success in college. And if you're a nerd for statistics like I am, you'll appreciate these graphs that show the findings of a really extensive study conducted in 2014, which shows that a high school GPA is actually a much better predictor of college GPA than your SAT or ACT scores are. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip through these, and you can check them out later when we send you the slides if you are really into statistics and graphs and charts. So we have 4 slides here for you guys to peruse later. So do these tests measure college readiness? I would argue that they do not measure college readiness. And I would actually agree with Hannah's guess that it measures how well you take a test, right? I think you were the one your mom was the one who wrote that in there for you. So that's absolutely right. They do measure how well you take a test. They don't always measure knowledge. There's no history knowledge or biology knowledge or anything like that that is asked of you, but they do measure other things. And we're going to dive into that later. I just want to put a big kind of like silver lining thing. If you prepare well to take these tests, then it really does allow you to practice those college readiness skills. It doesn't mean that you have them or don't based on how you do on the test. But if you do long-term preparation for this test, then you can really start practicing these skills and feel a lot more prepared to actually enter college. So although the tests are a bit of an inconvenience and an additional hurdle for you sometimes, they are also actually a great opportunity to build a skill set that will be really long lasting for you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit before I go into what's actually on them. Let's talk a little bit about pandemic trends. So The pandemic closed a lot of test centers, as you may have heard from the senior class. So a lot of tests were canceled. Even in California, only 16% of test centers were available compared to the previous year. So that extreme reduction in test availability made more and more colleges adopt a temporary test optional or test blind approach. So those are three, or test free. These are three different words that you've probably heard. So let's talk about what they mean. So I'm going to start with test blind or test free, kind of the same thing. I'm also a huge Friends fan, so I had to choose that. GIF. Your SAT score, if you're applying to a test blind or test free university, is not going to be considered as part of your college application at all. And I was in class with the junior class last week, and I told some of you about this, and you were like, wait, what? Because I told you that the UCs are permanently test free, which means that if you are deciding to apply to a UC or to only UCs, well, then you don't need to worry about this. If you know that's the only school system that you want to apply to, which I've never had a student who only applied to UCs. So I do want you to know, this is a really new thing, and the UCs have not figured out yet what they're going to do instead. So right now there's just no testing requirement. They have 13 other factors that they look at as part of your application. So it's still considered a holistic review process, but they're no longer factoring in SAT or ACT scores. You can send them a score report 100 times. They're not going to look at it. So those are fewer schools, the test blind, test free. A lot more schools are test optional. So let's really dive into the whole idea of test optional and what all this means. So you have two paths. Path one is the regular path that we're all used to. Test is required. You apply with a test, either the SAT or the ACT. So this option you can choose if you like your score, if you feel good about it, and you would like to submit it to be considered as part of your application. Pathway two is that you apply without an SAT or ACT score. And there's absolutely no better or worse way to do it. So let's dive into each pathway. Pathway one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. You submit a score and it gets factored into your application. But let's really take a deep dive into pathway two. What happens if I apply to a test optional school without submitting an SAT or ACT score? Well, I'm here to tell you there's absolutely no disadvantage to not submitting your scores if we're talking about admissions purposes, so getting in only. A school that is test optional really means optional. It means you can submit your score if you think it will strengthen your application, or you don't submit it if you think it will not be additive. So either way, it just becomes additive. There's no detriment, because if you don't like your score, you just don't submit it. Now, there are some possible very gray area disadvantages, so I just want to address them real quick. Some scholarships or honors colleges or accelerated degree options will still require you to send test scores. So you really, if you know that you might be applying to one of these programs or want to be eligible for all the possible scholarships, you may want to submit your test score. The other thing is that a lot of schools may not require a test score and say it doesn't factor into your financial aid, your merit scholarship eligibility. However, some merit scholarships, they really look at what is your overall academic profile. And if your GPA maybe has some things in there where you're like, man, I really should have tried harder in freshman year, or maybe math is especially hard for me and I'm not always getting the grades I want. If you want to balance that out to elevate your overall academic profile, and therefore you decide to apply with an SAT score, and now your profile is higher because you did well on it than it would have been if you hadn't applied with it, then even at schools that say they don't look at SAT scores for getting for scholarships, your entire profile is still elevated through it. And so it may still benefit you in getting some merit scholarships. So that's just something really important to know, that, you can have a real, you can have some real opportunities there. Now, test optional is not a new thing, so I just want to go through this really quickly. Bowdoin College was the first university to go test optional in 1969, and by March 2020, so pre-pandemic, we already had over 1,000 US universities that were test optional. So 38% of US universities were test optional. And within those, a lot were in the top 250 national universities and in the top 100 national liberal arts colleges with low acceptance rates, etc. So it's not a new thing. And it's just that the pandemic was kind of a catalyst to make the test optional movement more widespread. So that's when I would say the general public got to know more about it and got to learn more about it. So more and more universities decided to go test optional for 1 or 2 years during the pandemic. This started in 2020. Now we are in 2022 by now, right? And a lot of them did a trial run approach and said that they would reevaluate. And that's kind of where we're at right now in our new part of 2022. You guys are applying for 2023 and 2024, right? So keep that in mind, which one you're applying for too. So the 2022 applicants, the current seniors, the over 65% of universities were test optional or test blind for them, but it's going to be less for you guys. And why is that? Because of those 1,500 universities that were test optional for the current seniors, 375 of them decided that they would be test optional for only 2021 and 2022. So current seniors was the last year, not for 2023 applicants and beyond, which is you guys. 17 of them decided to do a 2-year pilot, so they don't know yet if they are going to continue being test optional or revert to being test required. We don't know that yet. They're deciding that in the next 6 months. 44 of them, again, were test blind, test free, but only until the applicant year 2022. So not for you guys, not for 2023 and beyond. And same here with the 84 test optional for 2023, but not for 2024. So if you are applying for fall 2023 or 2024, just know that you are most likely going to have several test required schools on your list. You're also probably going to have a good handful of test optional schools on your list because a lot of them did decide to stay test optional. So it's still much higher than pre-pandemic, but it's not going to be as high as for the students who applied during the pandemic, which makes sense, right? Test centers are now a lot more readily accessible. They're not getting canceled all the time. And so that's kind of the rationale behind it. Now, that was a lot of information and history and graphs and numbers. So let's take a quick break here we go, by doing a survey. So we really want to find out how have we been doing? We want to make sure that we're doing the best we can with you guys. And so we have 2 separate surveys, one for students, one for parents. Now, juniors, juniors and sophomores, you have not yet done the student survey. So if you guys could take your phone and just screen grab the QR code from the left, that's for the students. And then all parents, could you guys please get the QR code from the right? Just use your phone. And if we could just take about 5 to 7 minutes to fill out the survey, that would be wonderful, because we want to make sure that moving forward, we're really, making sure we're in line with the Waldorf mission, with what you guys really need and are looking for. So we really appreciate honest feedback. As you fill that out, I would also like for you, so Shawnee is our wonderful growth manager at Strive to Learn. So she just popped in the links to the surveys if you prefer those to scanning with the QR code. And also please write the student's name in the chat if you would like a one-on-one score report session with the counselor after the presentation ends. So just write it in the chat so that we can make a list, because we're going to do breakout rooms at the end where you get to ask questions one-on-one alone in a breakout room if you want to ask questions that you wouldn't ask in front of others. Now that's where you can go over your scores from your diagnostic tests that we did back in October and November from the SAT and the ACT, or if you don't have one, you can just ask other questions as well. I'll be in the Q&A for the main part, but you can move into individual sessions with Rachel and William, or two main counselors at Waldorf, to ask individual questions. So pop your name, pop the student's name in the chat if you would like to be put on the list to have a one-on-one at the end. And I'm going to stop talking so that you guys can focus on the survey. So I'll give you a few minutes. Once you're done with the survey, can you click the little raise hand button, please? That way I know I can see when are most of the hands raised. And that's when we'll dive right back in. And the more in depth you can go for us, the better. We appreciate any and all feedback. For anyone joining us a little bit later, just make sure to scan this QR code on the left if you're a student, on the right if you're a parent, and just fill out our quick survey. We just want to get some feedback on how the first semester has been with us, and whether or not you know, what you liked, what you didn't like, what else you would like. So go ahead and scan that code, or grab it from the chat. Shawnee, could you repost those links into the chat, please? That would be great. And then when you're done, just make sure to click the little raise hand button in your menu. This is great. Okay. Okay, so let me continue. And let's talk a little bit about the SAT and the ACT and compare them, and see what are they about. So both of them, both the SAT and the ACT have 4 sections, but they're a little bit different. So the ACT, it has an English section, math section, a reading section, and a science section. Well, the SAT has a writing and language section, a reading section, and 2 math sections. No science. No. Of the 2 math sections, one is with a calculator and the other one is without a calculator. While on the ACT, you can use a calculator on all of the math on the entire section that you have. The ACT and the SAT are pretty much the same length. They're both around 3 hours. Now you can see how here on the ACT it says with essay. An optional 5th section would be the essay, but the SAT no longer offers an essay. So most students don't take it with the essay because colleges are no longer requiring the essay since the SAT doesn't have an essay and they don't want to make a difference between the tests. So that's a good thing to know. Now the pacing of the ACT is a lot quicker than the SAT. You only have about 49 seconds per question across the entire test average, versus the SAT has 1 hour and 10 minutes per question. So that's quite a big difference right there. As far as the scoring goes, they're scored really differently. They're just trying to make your life hard, I think, here. The ACT is scored out of a total of 36 points by averaging the 4 sections that are also each out of 36. The SAT is out of a total of 1,600 or 1,600, where you add up 2 main scores. The writing and language and the reading get combined to a score out of 800. And then it gets added to your math score, which is the 2 math sections combined out of the score of 800. So something I want you to note here is on the ACT, we have 4 sections that are averaged out. One of those 4 sections is math, right? So it's only 1/4 of your score. It's only 25% of your score. Versus on the SAT, it's half your score. It's 50% of your score. That can be good and bad, right? So that's something that oftentimes factors into what kind of recommendation we might make as far as which test might be better for you, which test you would be, you would hate a little less and be able to be more motivated and have better improvements on. So as far as the approach of the SAT and the ACT tends to feel a little bit more straightforward, more like what you've seen in school, while the SAT depends a little more on inference and logic. Here I have an overview of how each section compares. There's a lot of information on here, and like I said, you'll get these slides so you can go back and look at everything, but I'm just going to point out some key differences. So as far as the English section goes on the ACT, it's the same as the writing and language section on the SAT, and they're really quite similar. The biggest difference, I would say, is that the SAT focuses a little bit more on rhetoric, while the ACT focuses a little bit more on grammar and usage and punctuation. But the biggest difference on these two is really the time per question. You have 33% more time per question on the SAT writing and language than on the ACT English. So that can change a lot for a lot of students. Now, when we look at the math, the SAT has a really strong emphasis on algebra, pre-algebra and algebra. They call it heart of algebra, while the ACT has a stronger emphasis on geometry than the SAT. They also give you formulas to look at on the SAT. On the ACT, they don't give you any formulas, but you do get to use your calculator for every single math question you might encounter, versus on the SAT, you have one shorter section where you cannot use a calculator. So that can also change things. And feel free to take your hands down unless you raise it for a different reason than filling out the survey. If we compare the reading sections, again, we can see that the SAT gives a lot more time per question, but it's also longer. It has more questions, 52 reading questions in 65 minutes versus the ACT has 40 questions. So 12 questions, less questions. So it can really go either way. Some students who really love reading, might prefer the SAT because there are more reading questions, but they might actually prefer the ACT because of the time constraint might make them actually score higher. If they are strong readers, they can get through it in that time constraint. So again, here, it depends on the student. There are a lot of factors as far as choosing which test is better. The science on the ACT, it is not a knowledge based science section. So as we were saying before, some of you were saying maybe they're testing knowledge. They are testing how well you can read graphs and tables and understand an outline of an experimental procedure. They are not asking you for memorized knowledge. They're just asking you to really dissect what they give you and have multiple choice. Now in the SAT, you don't have a science section, but you do have 21 questions about graphs and data in other spaces. Some are mixed in with the reading and some with the math. There's no essay section on the SAT. There is one on the ACT. And a lot more colleges super score the SAT than the ACT, which would mean that they take your highest scores across different test sittings, combine them to your biggest super score, which might be higher than you did on any single score. So those are kind of the key differences. And that's why we're offering, that's why it's really important to have the individual session with the counselor to really understand how does that apply to you, because there's no one formula in choosing which test is better. So let's talk a little bit about unique challenges and unique opportunities for you guys as Waldorf students on these tests. So let's start with the bad news first. What are the challenges? So multiple choice testing. These tests are multiple choice. There are no open answer questions except on the SAT math. That's the only time you have open answer questions. But it's just a number that you put into a grid, right? There's no explanation. There's no sentence you're writing, none of that. So it can be really hard to, suddenly force your education into a multiple choice test if you're not used to that. So that's something that we've seen Waldorf students struggle with. We've worked with Waldorf students for 6 or 7 years at Strive to Learn as far as test prep goes. And that is definitely one of the things that it's especially difficult, especially in a subject like reading, right? Is there really one right answer? Isn't there more to it? Can't we think more critically about this? So that can definitely be a hurdle, but you can learn it. These testing sessions are 3 hours, as we said. So it can also happen that the test session itself just feels pretty long because that's unusual. So practicing that is key. the idea of there being one right answer, right, can be really tricky. Also on the science section, for example. So those are the kind of things that might make it a little harder. Well, Waldorf students what we've seen tend to start with lower scores. So if you did get a lower diagnostic score, don't worry. We have seen a lot of Waldorf students throughout the years, and a lot of them started with lower scores, because of these challenges that I set up here. Yeah? These challenges oftentimes make Waldorf students start with lower scores than usual. But I'm going to come to the opportunities and positives in just a second. Let me just mention one more thing. These tests ignore some unique Waldorf strengths. So some content or skills that the Waldorf school really excels in providing, such as creative work, arts, collaborative learning, they are not on here. So you can't show them on here, right? So that's another challenge. But let's come to the good stuff. Let's really dive into this. So a lot of our students actually increase their score very significantly, much more than our average student, much more than our students who are not Waldorfians. So that is something really important to know. You may start lower than you wanted to or thought you would, but you probably are going to be able to really elevate your score once you get used to the multiple choice testing format, the longer test format, etc. So really learning and applying those testing strategies, these are strategies that students at schools that do have multiple choice tests may have already learned or practiced. That can really elevate your score quite quickly. Also, interdisciplinary learning is something that you guys really excel in, and that's so important on these tests. Like I said, you might have a science question mixed into the reading section, etc. You're going to have to connect the dots on different things. So it is really, really helpful the way that you have your different blocks, the fact that you have all sciences throughout all 4 years, all of these things that are really allow you to have a more interdisciplinary understanding will really aid you on these tests. And then the other opportunity is to show a university that you can excel in a more traditional setting. So Waldorf students really shine on college applications due to their non-traditional schooling, but there's always one question that remains for admissions officers. Will you do well in a more traditional setting if you're not used to it? So these tests and doing well on them can really show the admissions committee that you're well prepared to flourish in a new educational environment that might be more traditional than what you've experienced so far at Waldorf. And then you have it all. You're a win-win student because you bring the unique curriculum, the non-traditional schooling, and you're also showing them, hey, I can make the switch. You know, I can also excel in a learning environment that's different. So how do you decide which test to take? The best way to decide is to simply take a full-length practice test of each. If you haven't had the opportunity to do that, which we know some of you already did, but if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, we are including a link here to a free downloadable or proctored test. I believe there are also still tests in the front office with Shauna. So that is another place to look. Just ask her for one. You can also just ask us for one, or you can just print it yourself. So take one of each. Take a full-length SAT, a full-length ACT. Maybe you only took one of them when we offered them. I know everyone, well, not everyone, but all the juniors did take the PSAT. Now, if you didn't take the ACT that we also offered in December, talk to us, talk to William, click on this link, and make sure to take an ACT as well, so that you can compare the two and figure out which one really works for you. So we put a link here to some concordance tables. This is something that you can talk to your college counselor about anytime, anyone. It doesn't matter if you're a sophomore or a junior, anytime you can talk to them about it. So just make sure to do that. And then based on which test you hate less and where are you doing better, that's when you pick a test date and then you set a study schedule. So let's say you took 2 tests, right, an SAT and ACT, and you scored relatively the same. So what do you do then? I included a list here, quick list that just kind of shows how you can further decide if you feel like you kind of scored the same and you feel equally about the two. I'm going to skip over it because I've already said most of them, but it is here for your reference. So let's talk about the timeline. What timeline would you be looking at? Here's some official test dates throughout the end of this school year. After the end of this school year, they're still going to decide and solidify what the test dates are. That's the usual thing. So in the next few months, the test dates should come out. I think usually by April or May, you'll know what the fall test dates are. So you can see you have 4 ACTs and 3 SATs between now and July 16th. So that's kind of the opportunity there. Now, this would be a testing timeline for current sophomores. So I know we have at least 2 sophomores in here. So this is your testing timeline. Now, these boxes up here, the ACT, SAT, ACT, SAT, those are the boxes of when we anticipate you having the real test as a possibility. So you can see there are more during that semester. And then down below, this is kind of what we recommend. So if you're currently a sophomore, then we would recommend that you take a diagnostic test of each in May or June and talk to your counselor and really talk through, okay, which one should I choose? Should I take it? When should I take it, etc. Then we recommend that you prepare for the test between June and December, and you take 2 real tests along the way, one in September or October, and the other one in November or December. Don't take it when you have a big paper due, or sometimes students have the monologues at the same time as their ACT. Like, that's not a good way to plan, right? So really think about that and take practice tests in between. Let's come to the mid-year juniors testing timeline. So Lori, I see that you're asking to share the links. So we're going to send the slides to you, and then you can click on those links. So that should answer the question, I think. But let me know if you wanted a specific link or if you meant the survey. This is what it looks like for you juniors out here. It is now January, and you already took the diagnostic test. If you only took one of them, get on it, take the second one as well. And we really hope that you can be done with testing by June, July. That would be ideal. Just be done with it if you haven't already started. So that's why we say prepare for the test between now and the summer. And you could take your first real test around April, maybe March, maybe May. Depends on whether you're doing the SAT or the ACT. And then your second one, June or July, would be my recommendation. Again, it differs on an individual basis, but this is kind of what it would look like. And of course, doing practice tests along the way. So I recommend getting started now. If you decide to take the test, make sure that you register for it. We included a link here to register for the SAT. The SAT cost is $55, but there are fee waivers. So if you are in a certain income bracket, then you can qualify for a fee waiver. Just know that if cost is a barrier to you taking it, please feel free to talk to us about that. The ACT, here's the registration link, and the cost is $60, and they also have fee waivers. So what are some techniques to make sure that your score is high? So there was a great study done by Appleruth et al. In 2018. We linked it down below. I'll click through so that you can see the link. So this is here. If you guys really like reading through research, as I do, go ahead and take a look at that. And what they found that the techniques that really led consistently to higher scores were studying consistently over time. So I really recommend start studying early and consistently to get the greatest score increase. For example, it's a lot better to study for 10 weeks, 2 hours each week, than for 2 days, 10 hours each day. Now, that's the same amount of studying. It's 20 hours of studying, right, for the test. But you will see much better results if you space it out rather than cramming. And this study included over 1,000 participants. So it was really a big sample size, and it was really interesting. When you do homework and practice tests, make sure that the homework focuses on specific concepts, skills, and strategies for targeted areas of improvement. Also take time, so time yourself, take timed full-length practice tests, or do our proctored free tests that we offer proctored on Zoom to simulate the real testing conditions that build confidence, familiarity, and testing stamina. Also, students who take multiple official tests most often score the highest on their final test. And that's why I suggested in the timeline to take it at least twice to feel really good and confident about your score. And then, of course, you could also opt to do individualized one-on-one tutoring. One-on-one tutoring really allows for customized feedback and tailored instruction and practice based on what the student needs to work on. And that can be hard to discern sometimes when you're self-studying, to really figure out what are those aspects I need to hone in on. Okay, so let's just hear from a Waldorf alumna. I really hope this works. So if you can't hear the audio, oh, let's see. If you cannot hear the audio, let me know.
I want to say final advice.
Okay. Did anyone hear the audio on that? It was pretty quick. It was good. Okay, great. So let me tell you why we are watching this. We have a podcast, and Lily Lieberman is our podcast producer. And this was us recording a podcast episode just 2 days ago. I think it feels like a year ago. And it was just 2 days ago, and it was all about the SAT and ACT. And we ended up talking about her experience as a Waldorf student. So I just thought I would share that with you guys, because she just makes it a lot easier to, kind of listen your way into. So here we go.
Do you have any, I want to say final advice for students who are beginning their kind of testing journey right now?
Don't let the test define you. It really doesn't. The test is not a measure of whether you're a good student. It's not a measure of whether you're ready for college. I just want to say that, because every score report you get, it says college readiness benchmark, right?
Yeah.
It's so mean. Yeah, it really is.
It's so discouraging when you're below it. You're like, well, but I feel ready.
Yes. So just know that. Take this test, really take it as an opportunity to learn how to take a multiple choice test, to learn how to study long term. These tests are not opportunities in and of themselves to learn anything about yourself, but the studying you do for them, the preparation for them, that's what will really build a skill set for you that's going to be tremendously valuable in college, and also for the rest of junior year and senior year. This is the first time where you have to come up with a long-term study plan. Even if you're working with a tutor, you're still responsible, right? For doing your homework, for doing all these things, where it's not in a class, it's just you. It's, everyone else does it differently and at different times. And you have to deal with that, and you have to plan it out. And it's a really great way to learn that skill set. How can I study for a long-term test and still, learn something along the way? And I'm kind of babbling right now because I do also want to say one more thing. You were asking me for final advice, and I don't want to forget to say this. You may not have to take this test, either one of them.
Yeah.
Test optional is a real thing. It's great. Listen to our season 2 episode on SAT, ACT. I think it's in season 2. Am I right about
yes,
that?
It is. Okay. And, it's accompanied by multiple blog posts and other kind of
right.
media things that we've done.
Right. So definitely listen to that to learn more about what test optional means. But you may not have to take it if you are only applying to universities who are either test optional or test blind. Now, however, if you can basically create a score that would show a strength that you're not showing anywhere else in your academics, then this is your opportunity, right? So you can apply to a test optional school with your test scores to really strengthen your application. Mm-hmm. But if you don't like your test scores after you've taken the test, 2 times, 3 times, you're still not happy with it, you don't feel like it'll strengthen your application, then you do not need to apply with it. So my big advice is do the whole test prep thing, whether you do it on your own, using resources like Khan Academy, wonderful SAT prep resources on there, all free, completely free, or working in a more personalized, specialized way with someone like Strive to Learn Test Prep Tutor or any other organization. Regardless of how you do it, you'll learn a lot of skills to really prepare you for college. And if at the end of it, you are not happy with your test score, then you can decide which universities to submit it to or not submit it to. So you still have that opportunity. You don't need to decide that before you decide whether or not to take these tests and prepare for them. Just go for them, do your best, study hard for them. you will learn things that will benefit you tremendously in all other areas of your studies, because you will have math and reading and writing in everything else that you do until you start college, right? And then in college, a lot of reading and writing in any major, right? We always communicate through language, even if it's just emailing your professors about something. And you'll definitely have multiple choice tests. So learning how to take them is a really good idea. So that was a lot of final advice, but you know me, Lily, I cannot just say one thing. So I'm gonna try and cut myself off here. No.
No, I really appreciate it. And that was all excellent advice. I think that, it's hard to give final advice with this because everybody needs to hear something a little bit different, in my opinion. Like, we all need a little boost in different areas. So it's like, it makes sense to me that your final words would be extensive.
Yeah, that's a good word, extensive. Or babbling, we could call it babbling.
No,
too,
it's
but...
not babbling. It's very organized. It was very organized. Completely made sense.
Lily, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What final advice would you give any student taking this test?
Oh my God. I guess my final advice, my sister is a high school junior right now, and so it's something that has been on my mind recently, as she kind of figures out how to wrangle this process. I guess my final advice would be that this entire test journey is going to seem a lot less scary when you're on the other side of it. And like, that's true of a lot of things in life. Can you hear people talking?
Okay.
But in my opinion, this is one of the most stark differences that I've experienced in life, where between the incredible, terrifying, monstrous image of what it is that you have to do, and then looking at it and realizing it's really just this tiny thing that you get through by getting through it. You just get through. And I'm proud of the work that I put in over that time period to do that. But I also, I'm happy that I can kind of look back and laugh about how insignificant it has wound up being. And yeah, it doesn't do damage to you to do it. I think that was one of my worries at the time, was like, oh no, the stress of this and all of the pressure, and this is really going to hurt me. And, there is a lot of stress, there is a lot of pressure, but it doesn't change you. It has no impact on who you are. And it is something that you pass through, and eventually it's all okay.
So I lied. That was not my last question to you. I would also love to know how it affected you to actually prepare for these tests over the course of a year and study for them. Like, what effect did it have on you?
So one kind of measurable effect that it had on me was I went to a very small high school, and we basically, everyone in every grade takes the math level for that grade. There is no like AP math or accelerated anything until I believe 11th grade. Junior year. And you can separate into you can decide, okay, well, I did really well in math this year. I've scored high enough consistently that I can place into a higher level of math. I am generally not a strong math student, and I have never been. But I realized a couple of months into my junior year that I was doing like much better in my regular math classes than I had in the past. And I would credit that mostly to the fact that I had never had to do such rigorous and consistent math work outside of school before. And nothing that had that much structure and kind of study skills built into it. And so I was able, after my first semester of junior year, to place into an advanced math class that only had 5 people in it besides me. And then in my senior year, I took calculus at my school, which is a fairly rare thing. Very few people wind up taking calculus at my school outside of the block system. Everyone takes pre-calc and calculus in a block, but not as a track class, which I can get into at a different time. But essentially, I wound up taking the highest level math class available at my high school. And I would say that's probably directly because I had to do math for a year and a half that I would not have done otherwise. and to build my study skills and my ability to actually critically think about math. And yeah, that really, it assisted my college applications. It made my transcript look, I would say, much more well-rounded than it would have, because I'm a strong humanities and arts student. And yeah, I definitely think it had a great impact on my regular academics outside of test prep.
Okay, so that was Lily. Let me just, sorry, I need to close the window, and there we go.
Do you have any,
Oh, no.
I want to say, final advice for students who are beginning their kind of testing journey right now?
Okay.
Don't let the test define you.
There we go. I managed to stop it. Okay, thank you guys. So I added here this little audio button. So if you did want to listen to the full episode, that was just 9 minutes of it. Feel free to right here by clicking on this audio button once I send out the slides. We haven't released it yet. Usually you would just get it on, Spotify or the Apple Podcast app or whatever you use. Our podcast is called Mindful Admissions, so you'll find it on there. It'll be released in a few weeks. But it's already there. We already finished it. So I just want to add a little caveat that, go Josh, yes, that Lily did do test prep. And she started the summer before junior year and continued for a full year, very consistently and spread out. So what we talked about earlier with how can you, best prepare in a way that really builds confidence and that skill set that you can then take forward. She did several of those things, right? Studying consistently over a longer period of time, taking the test multiple times, and also doing individualized one-on-one test prep to really hone in on those areas that she specifically needed to work on. So just wanted to share that with you because it wasn't even planned. We just kind of started talking about this while we were recording the podcast. And yeah, I hope that was helpful to you guys. So how do you self-study? Again, be organized, have a consistent study plan, pencil it in to your calendar and stick with it. So make sure you're reviewing skills and concepts and practice your testing strategies, and take full-length practice tests as you go. Here are a bunch of free resources to study for the SAT, and I also really recommend buying some test prep books. And then here we have some free resources for the ACT. So take a look at that to figure out kind of your self-study plan and get some input from your counselor. How can I best self-study? Which test should I be aiming for? What should I be studying for? So you can get a little bit of input on that. Not all of our counselors are test prep tutors, but they do know the tests as really well as far as timing and when to take them, things like that. If you do decide to choose a test prep program, ask them this. My recommendation, just to kind of gauge the quality of who's going to be helping you with this test. Is the program tailored to how you learn? So you'll want to find a tutoring company that really accommodates both how you learn in terms of learning style and online or in-person format, as well as accommodating your school schedule, right? Who is available after 3:30 or 4? Are the sessions one-on-one? A lot of them may seem like they're one-on-one programs, but actually they're 2 or 3 on 1, or they have a lot of group session aspects. And research really does show that the only studying method that has actually produced statistically significant score increases is through private tutoring, which is 60% more efficient than group classes and workbooks or online courses. So ask them that. And then also ask, do they focus on building self-efficacy? So students who really feel prepared do better on actual tests. So find a tutor who focuses on building that self-efficacy by teaching skills, and skip the companies that focus on hacks or tips and tricks, and create a tutor dependency, because you do not want a tutor dependency. So ask them if their students can study on their own, if they give them materials to be able to study on their own, because an excellent prep company is really one that tries to put itself out of business by fostering independence. We at Start to Learn have been working with Waldorf students for over 6 years, like I said, and we're really familiar with how to make standardized tests accessible to Waldorf students. So let me just quickly tell you a little bit about our program. We we basically create a customized study plan for every single student based on the very, very detailed score reports that we create based on how you do on the test. So it's very customized. Every individual is treated differently and always works one-on-one with a tutor. We have instruction on skills and strategies. We have practice, and we focus also a lot on process. What is your process as you take the test? Not just the knowledge, because if you have the knowledge but not the process, you still won't be able to show it on the test. So we really focus on building that self-efficacy and confidence by instilling a growth mindset in any of our students, helping them build long-term study habits that work for them. And again, everyone is different, right? I may teach one student to do X, Y, and Z, and another student I would never give that tip to because it just wouldn't work for him. We have in-person and we have online tutoring. And Waldorf students get 10% off of any test prep and tutoring as part of the partnership that we have with your school. So here's a link to contact us to get started, or you just email info@strivetololearn.com. Shawnee, maybe you can just pop that in the chat real quick. You can also ask me more about that. Okay, that was it for SAT, ACT. So I just want to tell you about the events that we have coming up. So we have a gap year webinar coming up, which is really exciting. William, could you please pop in the chat when exactly that's happening, since it's not on this slide? Unless it's, oh no, it is on this slide. Oh, I'm an idiot. There was another bullet point. So it's on Wednesday, February 2nd. So it's next week, a week from today, 6 p.m. I really recommend for parents and students to attend it, even if you have no idea what a gap year is or why you would ever want one. This is probably going to focus also very much on how do I find my curiosity and my passion. So things that really concern all of you, right? So it'll be really relevant for anyone, even if you're not going to take a gap year. I think the content of what Julia is going to talk about is going to be really exciting. She's part of the Gap Year Association. And I actually just did a podcast episode with her that we recorded and we'll be releasing in our next season in a few weeks. That was just so insightful. So definitely check it out. We're also going to do a spring college fair, where we are going to have a bunch of college representatives visit campus. It's going to be right after school, probably beginning of March. We're honing in on the exact date right now. It might be March 2nd, so stay tuned. And that's where you'll really be able to get to just walk around and talk to a bunch of different colleges. So we're currently solidifying that as we organize all those colleges to come all at the same time. I say we, it's really William. I really shouldn't say we. William is the person who's creating all of these events, as well as this slideshow. So thank you, William, for doing that. And then we have the Spring College and Career Night coming up also in March, probably in the second half of March before, all the busyness of April starts. And at that College and Career Night, it will be similar to our college info night that we had in the fall. We're going to have virtual workshops and presentations on a variety of topics for all grade levels. So definitely tune into that. We're going to have a lot of great stuff for juniors and sophomores. We also have things for seniors. And I really encourage you to tune into that one. We are going to have a lot of guest experts on there. So it's not just going to be us talking, because I'm sure at some point you're going to get tired of us chewing off your ear. But it will happen in March, and William will email everyone about it. We also created an SAT and ACT survival guide. So you're going to get this slideshow, but you're also going to get the SAT, ACT survival guide if you click on here. And then William will also upload that to everyone's My Drive. So this slideshow will be on everyone's My Drive, the SAT, ACT survival guide. So the My Drive is inside SCORE. And if you don't know how to access SCORE, just email us. William, could you actually pop your email into the chat, please? In case there are some sophomores here who haven't connected with their counselors, they could email you directly and get started in asking questions. So definitely do that. Again, we have a weekly podcast. It's actually going to be every second week from now on to stretch it out a little bit more and not give all the goodies away so quickly. So Mindful Admissions, our new season, our third season, is airing with its first episode on Monday. on January 31st, and it's very exciting because it's our entire team talking about the Varsity Blues scandal and what we think of that and how that reflects our profession, or I should say how it really does not reflect our profession. So tune into that one. That's going to be a juicy episode. All right, I think that we're at the Q&A. Yes, we are. So I'm going to stop sharing so that you guys